Hi class, today we're going to be looking at Chapter 5, Problem 17B. You should be able to see Problem 5-17B. And this is going to be for the Brennan Company. And what they've done is they've given you the wages that were paid by quarter for this particular year. And so they've given you the total amount of wages paid for each quarter, and then they added them all together to get the total wages paid to each employee this quarter. It says for 2021, State D's contribution rate for Brennan Company based on the experience rating system of the state was 3.6% of the first 7,000 of each employee's earnings. So this is the FUTA rate, the state unemployment rate, and this is the ceiling for FUTA. The state tax returns are due 1 month after the end of each calendar quarter. During 2021, the company paid $3,024 of contributions to State D's unemployment fund. And the employee's phone number was this, and this was their reporting number. And using the forms below, complete the following for 2021. Indicate each form, the date that the form should be electronically submitted, and the amount of money that must be paid. In Part A, the last payment of the year is used to pay FUTA taxes for the fourth quarter of 2021. The first 3 quarters liability was more than the $500 threshold. So what that means is they had to make more than one payment this year. Once the quarter has reached or has accumulated at least $500, then you have to pay federal unemployment taxes. They want you to know that State D is not a credit reduction state. And they want you to enter the month, the date, the year format. And there's only one employee who has not capped. So what we mean by that is we need to look at these employees to see how many of them have made the first $7,000. That would be the ceiling for FUTA as well as for SUTA. But what we're talking about in A is when the payment has to be made for FUTA in the fourth quarter. And since they told you the first 3 quarters liability was more than $500, they will have to pay at the end of the year the fourth quarter taxes that are owed. The tax payment date would be on 1/31 of 2020. The amount that they would need to pay for FUTA, now here's the key, there's only one employee who is not capped, and you have to determine which employee that is. So in other words, we have to go through and add up all the wages to see when the employee reaches $7,000. And there's one employee who has not done that. And I've created a spreadsheet to help you to look at that, but I would just go ahead and tell you right now that Kelly Woods, you see that she was paid $2,500 in the first quarter. That's not $7,000. 300 in the second quarter. If we cumulatively add together each quarter's wages for Kelly Woods, the first quarter was 2,500. We're going to add 2,300 to that. It still does not reach 7,000. So we're going to move on to the third quarter, which was 1,900. And in the third quarter, she had made $6,700. So only 300 of the $1,800 that is left that she's paid in quarter 4 is subject to FUTA taxes. So again, that's 2,500 plus 2,300 plus 1,900 gives you $6,700. The ceiling is 7,000. Take 7,000, subtract $6,700 from that, and that means that 300 of this 1,800 is subject to FUTA taxes. So I will multiply 300 times the FUTA tax rate, which is 0.006, and the amount of FUTA taxes that I owe in the fourth quarter are $1.80. So with the FUTA return, they're going to have to deposit the $1.80 for the fourth quarter because they have already deposited the first 3 quarters because the liability was more than $500. In Part B, it says the employer's report for unemployment compensation in State D, the fourth quarter only. Item 1 is the number of employees employed in the pay period that includes the 12th of each month in the quarter. For Brennan Company, the number of employees is 10 in October, 9 in November, 8 in December. You have to know this, so underline this in your book. All 13 weeks, credit weeks during the quarter, except for Sun, who was 8 weeks, and Harrow, which is 9 weeks. So 2 of the employees only worked 8 weeks and 9 weeks. You need to know that when you're filling out your state unemployment tax return. On the first part of this form here, notice this is for the state, and this is the employer's report for state unemployment compensation. The total covered employees in the pay period includes the 12th of the month. So what they want to know is how many employees were in the first month, and that is given. That was given right here. The number of employees in October is 10. For November, it is 9. And in December, there are 8. They also want you to record the gross wages. And this is just for the quarter, the last quarter of the year. That's all they want for the fourth quarter only. So the fourth quarter total wages are $66,800. 66,800 goes in this block right here. In Part 4, the taxable wages for employer contributions, remember all of the employees went over the ceiling which for the state happened to be 7,000, just like it was for the federal, except for one of the employees. And that one employee was Kelly Woods. Remember, she was up to 6,700 at this point and after 3 quarters. And in the 4th quarter, they paid her $1,800, but only 300 was subject to that, because 7,000 was the ceiling for the FUTA. So I'm going to check my work. Just make sure I've got everything written in properly. All right, and then in part 5, it says the employer's contributions. They want to know how much state contributions that they made. So we're going to have to take these $300 wages that were subject to the state tax. The state tax was 3.6%. So 300 times 3.6% gives you $10.80. So $10.80 goes here. That was the state taxes that were owed. The total contributions then is line 3 and line 5, which is still $10.80. And they paid on time, so there was no interest or penalty. The total remittance is $10.80. Now I noticed on the side here, they've got a drop-down list here. It says sign here, do not print. This is for the Brennan Company. And I'm going to put the title here, Terry Brennan. And he was the president or vice president or something like that. Let's see what they say. I'm just going to say he's the president of the company. We'll see if that's right or wrong. And this date would be the first month after the quarter. And the phone number had to be given somewhere in here. Right there. And I'm going to check my work again because I might have missed something on that port. Oh, got it all right. So we're going to move on then. So this is the amount that we owed for state taxes. And then right here, this is the quarterly report of wages paid to each employee. So what we have to do is put the name and the telephone number of the preparer. If I remember right, that's who was preparing it. The total number of pages in this report. So that'd be one. I guess it's just one. page 101, it says down to bottom. So I'm going to just put 1 there because I'm thinking that's what they want. The total number of employees listed in items 8 on all pages. And you're going to count the number of employees: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then gross wages must agree with item 2 on UC2, the sum of item 11 on all pages of UC2. All right, I'd fill that in, but definitely you could get it up here. $66,800. Was for the 4th quarter. And then here, the gross pages for the quarter, gross wages for the quarter for Sun was 4,100. And I believe Sun was one of those odd people out who had less than 13 weeks. They gave you that information. Sun had 8. And then Marrow, you're just copying the wages, 4,700. And there were 13 weeks that he was employed. And Wade was 3,200. Weeks. And Con was 5,500. There. You're basically just putting down the wages of the 4th quarter. And everybody had 13 weeks except Harrow down there at the bottom. So I'm copying the rest of this out of my textbook because it's easier than scrolling up and down. But all this comes straight out of your textbook. Let's see, Woods. Okay, they skipped that one, I'm sorry. 1,800. 16,900. 9,800. 8,400. 2,400. Which was a total of 66,800. And this was 13 weeks. And this last person, Harrow, they told you that Harrow was 9 credit weeks. Okay, and that's the part of the employer's quarterly report of wages paid. The next portion of this is the 940 return that you have to file for your federal unemployment taxes once a year. And again, they wrote in the company information for you here. And this, let's put none of those applied. And they've already typed in for you what you needed in part 1. This was from state D. what they want you to put in is the total payments to all employees. Now, this is for the entire year. And for the entire year, the amount was given at $267,700. And then you have to figure out the payments exempt from FUTA taxes. And this was kind of complicated, class, I thought. So what I had to do is make a spreadsheet to try to keep myself straight. So what I did is I copied into the spreadsheet this information right here. And so I'm going to stop sharing this with you for just a minute, and I will show you my spreadsheet. I'm going to do a new share. Let me try to do it like this. Okay, you should be able to see the spreadsheet where I've copied the information from the problem into the spreadsheet. This was the given information here. And what I did is I made me up a little thing that would calculate the amount of the wages that were paid in each quarter for each person and how much of that was subject to the $7,000 base for FUTA. In other words, when we start with Mason, in the first quarter, she didn't get paid anything. So of course, we wouldn't owe anything for her. In the second quarter, she got paid $6,100. So all $6,100 would be taxable for FUTA purposes. The base is $7,000 for FUTA. The ceiling is $7,000. So if we know that we paid her $6,100 in the second quarter, she only can be taxed on $900 of the next quarter. Remember, there is a ceiling of $7,000 for FUTA purposes. So $6,100 she was paid in the second quarter would be taxable for FUTA, and only $900 of this $6,300 would be taxable for FUTA purposes. For David Marrow, in the first quarter, we paid him $4,000. So all $4,000 is taxable in the first quarter. We paid him $3,800 in the second quarter. The ceiling is $7,000. So if $4,000 was taxable in the first quarter, only $3,000 of the $3,800 would be taxable in the second quarter for David Marrow. So he reached $7,000 in the second quarter. For Randy Wade, you'll take the $2,900, you'll add $2,700 to that. $2,900 and $2,700 brings you to a cumulative total of $5,600. And then I'm going to add $2,900 of the third quarter's wages to that, and that takes us too far up. So if we add the third quarter's wages, we're above the ceiling at $8,500. So only part of the third quarter's wages is subject to that FUTA tax. So add $2,900 and $2,700 together. That brings you to $5,600. Subtract $7,000 minus the $5,600. That will leave you with $1,400 that is taxable for FUTA purposes for Randy Wade. And then we're going to do the same thing for this. So $3,800, all of that's taxable in the first quarter. The difference between $7,000 and $3,800 means that $3,200 is only taxable in the second quarter for con. For morose, all 7,000 was taxable in the first quarter because they earned more wages. Only 7,000 is taxable for FUTA purposes. And for Maury Black, 6,500 was taxable in the first quarter. Only 500 of the 4,100 would be taxable in the second quarter. For Kelly Woods, you remember that in the state unemployment, we figured that she had been paid all 3 quarters and only 300 would become from the fourth quarter. So the fourth quarter is only 300 here for Kelly Woods. For Terry Brennan, 7,000 in the first quarter. For Art Mintz, he didn't get paid anything till the third quarter. All 7,000 is in the third quarter. For Rudolph, all 7,000 is in the first quarter. And for Weiner, all 7,000 is in the second quarter. And I've got all of these in the spreadsheet down here where you can see them. And then Ryan Harrow, 5,300 was taxable in the first quarter. If you subtract 7,000, or excuse me, take 7,000, subtract 5,300 from that, that leaves you with 1,700 that would be taxable in the second quarter. So the next thing that I did is I added up each quarter the amount of wages that was subject to that $7,000 ceiling. So I just added the columns up basically. Then I added them across to get 84,000 was the total amount of wages that were subject to the FUTA taxes. Also, for each quarter, I multiplied the total wages that were subject to the FUTA taxes by 6%. I did that for each one of these. So the FUTA taxes that are owed in the first quarter is $276. In the second quarter, it's $159. Remember your $500 rule. So the first quarter plus the second quarter brought you to $435. There was no tax deposits that had to be made until the third quarter. When we add the third quarter wages in there, it brings us to $502.20. So all of this has to be deposited on the third quarter, all of this added together on the third quarter. You'll remember that only 300 were subject to the FUTA taxes in the fourth quarter. So $1.80 was all that we had to pay in the fourth quarter. So we had 2 tax deposits, one for the combination of all of this, which was $502.20. And since that went above the $500 limit, it had to be deposited at the end of the third quarter. And we also had to deposit the $1.80 at the end of the fourth quarter when we filed our return. So the total wages for the quarter, that was the given amount that they gave to us. We're going to subtract from that the total wages that were subject to FUTA, which was 84,000. And the difference is the number of wages that are not subject to FUTA. This is what we're going to pick up and put on our 940 form. So I'm going to do a new share. And we're going to go back to here. And we're going to pick up the amount. And I forgot what the amount was. So hang on just a second. We're going to pick up the amount from a spreadsheet. Now you'll have this spreadsheet because I'm going to give it to you. And so in line 4, we're going to look at the wages that were not subject to FUTA. 183,700, and the wages that were subject to FUTA were 84,000. So let me go back again. To Cengage. The payments that were exempt from FUTA taxes would have been 183,700. I'm sorry, this is not correct. They're wanting the 84,000 here. And then we're going to check all that apply. And there was none that were, I'm sorry, this is 0 here. Let me see here. Total payments made to each employee in excess of 7,000 was 183,700. That's from the spreadsheet. And I think what they mean right here is like if we had paid our employees, so we had contributed to their 401k plan, that would be listed there. And so when we add the two of these together, it's going to give us 183,700. And then when we subtract this, that should leave us with the amount of wages that were subject to FUTA. So 267,700 minus 183,700 is 84,000. Again, this information is on your spreadsheet. And I'm going to multiply line 7 by 0.006. And the total amount of the FUTA was $504. I'm going to go ahead and check my work just to make sure my math is correct there. All right, and it is correct, so this has to be 0. And then we will move on to part 3. It says determine your adjustments. If any line does not apply, leave it blank. And none of this applied to us. They weren't a credit reduction state, so we didn't have to fill in line 11 or any of this. determine your FUTA tax and balance due or overpayment. If any line does not apply, leave it blank. The total FUTA tax after adjustments is still going to be $504. There were no adjustments here. The FUTA tax deposited for the year, including any overpayment applied from a prior year. And the amount that should have been deposited was on our spreadsheet. So I'm going to flip to our spreadsheet. I'm not sure if you can see this, but I will post that spreadsheet to you. And if the deposit would have to be made at the end of the third quarter, that's when it reached $500. And so to get the amount of that deposit, it was $276 plus $159 from quarter two and quarter three. It amounted to $502.20. That was the third quarter's deposit. So I'm going to go back to Cengage. And I'm going to put the amount we've deposited so far, which is $502.20. The balance due says if line 12 is more than line 13, enter the excess on line 14. So if we take 504 and we subtract 502.20 from that, that'll leave us with $1.80 that you'll remember we calculated by hand that we would owe with the return. There was no overpayment. And then in part 5 says, report your FUTA tax liability by quarter only if line 12 is more than 500. So we go back to line 12, it was more than 500. So we've got to report the liabilities for the FUTA taxes. And so for the first quarter, it's coming from the spreadsheet. And the first quarter, it was $276. The second quarter was $159. The third quarter was $67.20. And the fourth quarter was $1.80. So I'm going to go back to my Cengage. In the first quarter, I'm going to put I'm sorry, I was about to do the wrong thing. It says do not enter the amount you deposited, but if you had a liability for the quarter, you got to put it in there. So let me go back to my spreadsheet again. We're picking up the liability was 276. Oh, that was correct. And 159 and 67.20. So let's get back to where it was. And that total ought to add back up. Adding it all together here. And that'll give you 504. And that has to equal line 12. And line 12 was 504. So that's what they wanted to put there. This is for the liability, not the actual amount that you deposited. And the answer to part 6 is no, we're not going to allow anybody else to do this. And then they would sign off on the return. And I'm going to click check my work, and I'm going to review what I put in just to make sure everything is correct. Right, I must have counted the number of employees wrong there. So total number of employees listed in item 8. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's try 10 and see if that works. Oh, that's what they wanted. All right, so this is how you would fill out this particular problem. And again, I'll attach the Excel spreadsheet to your Blackboard course so that you will understand where we got the information from. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.